Hi everyone, welcome back to Winging It. We're on week 8, and now that we're well through February, I'm noticing here in Lincolnshire a definite sign that spring is in the air. And I've been particularly delighted this week to hear the sounds of birds coming back into my garden. And so that's what we've taken our inspiration from this week. Our prompt is birds. Don't worry if you're not a confident artist and you're concerned about how you're going to create a bird in embroidery. We've taken a really straightforward approach, and so hopefully this is accessible for everybody. Now, if you're going to stitch along with my design that I'm going to make in this video, you are going to need some lace or some sheer fabrics. So have a root around in your stash, dig out your bits and pieces, and let's get stitching.
Okay, so I've spent quite a long time thinking about our prompt for this week, and in all honesty, I really struggled to come up with a good idea. I was thinking back to our ideas for the cold colours prompt, and the idea of using sheer fabrics that I talked about with the iceberg idea and the icicles idea. And I thought I wanted to play around with that. So the design I've come up with for mine this week is this. So I know it doesn't look much. I'm hoping it's going to be more exciting as we get into it. But what I thought we could do is lay some sheer fabrics or lace in sort of horizontal lines like cloud, and then embroider a flock of birds in flight over the top, just sort of sweeping down. Now there's not obviously an opportunity to use laced and threaded stitches, so I thought we could overstitch the clouds with some of those and then add in the birds in a much darker colour, maybe a navy blue, because it's a nice cold colour. So we're going to have to play with this. I don't know whether it'll work. Let's find out together. Right, so I've got a white background, so this is going to be quite tricky to see. So I'm working on this lovely, I think it's called Peaceful Blue. It's a sort of pale grey blue, and it's just got that lovely quality of a winter sky about it that I quite like. And I've got here a bunch of lace, and I've got some organza ribbon. I'll hold it over the blue. I've got a bit of ribbon with a stronger edge there, and I've got some patterned laces here that are, I've looked for laces that have got sort of horizontal patterning in them. So I've got some different bits of lace. I've got that one, which is a bit of a favourite of mine, and I've got this gorgeous stuff. I have no idea what it is, but it's a sort of mesh, and it's got a bit of a sheen to it that I really like, so I thought that looked quite nice. I've got a bit of white linen that I found, and do you remember this shiny stuff from when we did cold colours? Well, I looked at the back and found that it was silvery, and I thought that looked amazing. So don't forget that your fabrics have a back and a front, and sometimes the back can be quite useful. So we're just making this up as we go along. So I'm going to just cut out some sort of slivers of fabric, just little, we're going to create sort of striations in the sky, like wisps of cloud. So let's get some silver in. Some of them will go all the way across and some of them won't. Let's get a bit of this mesh stuff because I really like it and want to use it. Now what you can do is layer up. So I've got my mesh there. I might put my silver over the top of that mesh. And I'm just laying out my fabrics. Let's get some of this organza. And let's get some lace going. I quite like this, so what I'm going to do is use part of the motif of this lace. So I'm just going to cut around that sort of stronger white wibbly line. I don't often use lace, I'm not a huge fan, but every now and again it's the perfect fabric for a project. So I've got my little wobbly bit there. I think that could work. I'm just laying it over the bottom of that organza piece. What else have we got here? Oh yeah, I quite liked these little, it's almost like a daisy chain, and I think this one's cut off and it's hardly, I can't imagine a good opportunity. I need to get my embroidery scissors in here. Can't imagine a good opportunity to use that motif with it being cut off, so I think it'll work quite well to frame my design. So I'm not being hugely careful. I don't mind if there's a bit of the mesh part of the lace left on. So that will go quite nicely along the bottom edge there. So I'm going to lay that down. Oh, I've got the edging of a handkerchief as well here that's got a sort of scalloped edge, so maybe I'll put that at the top. There's another sort of pattern. Actually, clouds tend to be lumpy on the top rather than on the bottom. So if I put that one up there, and then I can use this one down here, that'd be quite nice. And this has got some interesting motifs in it as well. Maybe I'll use this edge piece here. Oh, actually, no, I've done it, I don't like it. Oh, what about this here? If I cut that across there, and then cut around this. I hope you can see it's got some almost like cloud shapes on it. So it's just playing with your composition just to see what works and what looks right. The problem with these fabrics is that you can't use Bondweb, obviously, because they're sheer and they are going to melt when you iron them because they're synthetic. So what I'm going to do is use some of my machine silk that's really, really fine, and I'm just going to use some tiny stitches to catch the lace onto the felt. So I'm just going to move some pieces, and we'll start with this bit of mesh here, and I'll just lift the camera slightly and show you what I'm going to do. So if you notice, there are little lines in this mesh fabric, and I'm going to use my thread to just do tiny stitches over the top of some of those lines. I'm not going to do loads because we're going to embroider as well over the top. So I'm catching just with a tiny stitch the little pieces of thread on my fabric. If you're using lace, this is a really good technique to use. So I'm just using absolutely minuscule stab stitches just over the top of the thread. So I'm coming up one side of it and going down the other. and it's just going to hold my, I suppose this is a kind of lace, this mesh, it's going to hold it in place, and then when I embroider over the top it'll hold it down even more. But what I don't want is great big stitches that are going to change the look of my mesh fabric. So I'm going to stitch these down using this technique, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about the next stage. Right, so I've attached all my lace and mesh and organza, and I'll try and show you a bit better. So I've got all sorts of different textures and a bit of sparkle on there, and I quite like the way that it creates a sort of sense of it being cold and frosty. So I'm going to use my favourite trick and pop my aperture over the top just to get a better sense of what it looks like. So that's my cloudy sky at the moment. So what I'm going to do now is use these very pale threads that I've gathered together here to add some more striations across the sky. So I'm just going to build up this sense of wispy cloud as we go across. So let's start with some white, and I'm just going to add some whipped back stitch, and I'm using this partly for decoration but partly to reinforce these pieces that I've attached. I don't want to change the appearance of the lace too much. So I'm just using some judgment where I can see the lace is a little bit loose because my slab stitches are very far apart, because I didn't want them to be too intrusive. I'm just looking for areas where the lace needs a little bit of help sitting flat, and I'm just back stitching along. So I'm not quite following the line of the edge of the lace, but I'm not going too far away from it either. And I do want this to be almost horizontal, so I'm not bothered about it being completely straight. You don't often see very straight lines in the sky, but I don't want it to be too wavy because I want it to look like a strip of cloud. And again, it's not going to look photographic, but it's going to be reminiscent of those wispy clouds that you get in winter skies. So there's my first line of back stitch, and I'm going to whip that with this blue. I think I've got this lovely icy blue that's a very similar colour to the felt that I'm using, so it'll be a nice way of bringing some of that background colour back to the surface. I quite like the fact that on this one I can see a lot of the felt. Now I'm going to use the eye end of my needle here because I don't want to catch my organza, so I'm deliberately not going to use the point of my needle to do my whipping. Another way you could create clouds on this piece is to add some areas of seed stitch. So if you haven't got lots of lace or sheer fabrics, you could do streaks of seed stitch that will give that sort of wispy effect as well. You could just do your lines of whipped and laced stitches. That would look very nice indeed, I think. So don't panic if you don't have loads of lace and sheer fabrics like this. There are lots of things you could do. Another thing that you could use, and you're going to think I've gone absolutely mad in saying this, is tea bags. If you, because tea bags are made with, they tend to have plastic in them, but they're actually made with cotton, a lot of them. You could use the outside of tea bags to create your clouds, or dried out baby wipes. Again, you're going to think I've gone mad, but these are all things that most people have knocking around the house that would work a treat for this panel this week if you want to create clouds. You could of course do something completely different. You could just do a bird on a branch. You could do whatever you like really. So I'm hoping this will pick up nicely. So I've got a line of whipped back stitch there, and it's very pale. You can't see very much colour, but that's exactly what I'm going for. So I'm going to add some more lines of whipped back stitch across my background, and then we'll add the birds and do the finishing touches. Okay, so here's my panel with my whipped back stitch. So if I bring it close, hopefully you can see. I don't know whether you pick up all the shades, but I've got a mint, a lilac, I've got a sort of green grey, and I've got a sort of turquoisey colour in there, and a pale blue. So I've got my lines of whipped back stitch, and it's just helping hold down the lace, and it's adding just a little bit of something else to my background. So the last thing we need to do is add in our birds, and I've got 3 different navy blue threads here. So I've got my fairly thick sheepies cotton, I've got some stranded cotton in a navy blue, and I've got a sewing cotton in a sort of dark teal blue sort of colour. And the reason I've got these is so that I can create different thicknesses of thread as I'm sewing. So I'm going to start with my thickest thread. Normally we work background to foreground, so but I'm not going to overlap my bird, so I just want to make sure that my thread weight suggests birds at different distances away. So what I'm going to do is a sort of sweep, diagonal sweep across the middle. So all I'm going to do, I don't know whether this will work because I haven't tried it, so we'll just see. All I'm going to do is do 2 straight stitches to make a V. So my birds that are closest to the front are going to be stitched in this dark blue. There we go. And I'm just going to work my way across like this. And I don't want my V's to be perfect because I want it to look natural. And also I need to remember that when birds fly together in formation, they don't all have their wings up at the same time. So some of my birds are going to have wings that point down. And I'm trying to keep it sort of uneven. I don't want a straight diagonal line, so I want this to look like a flock of birds. So let's have another one with its wings up. Just trying to keep it random, and it's totally not random because I'm thinking quite hard about how I'm stitching the birds, but I want it to look like it's random. So let's have another one with its wings up here. You can tie off your thread each time. I've got thread going everywhere on the back, but I'm not too worried about it. I think I am going to tie it off there because I just want one more over this side with its wings down. Okay, so that's my thickest thread. So now I've got 2 strands of the stranded embroidery thread, and I'm just going to add in some birds. I'm going to make these a little bit smaller to make it look like they're further away. Okay, and finally I'm going to get my sewing thread and just add some really tiny birds, and I might just put 1 or 2 up here and down here as well. Okay, so here's our finished piece. So we've got our birds in flight over a cloudy sky, and if I just bring in my aperture, that's what we've got. So I hope you've enjoyed that this week. You can judge for yourself how successful that's been. I think I quite like it. We're not going to think every single one is perfect, are we? So I think this is one that will grow on me as I go through the process. So that's our piece for this week. Can't wait to see what you create inspired by the prompt birds, and I will see you next week in our live stream session. So next Sunday is our 4th week in February, and we'll be streaming live on Sunday afternoon, so look out for the links to that video and I will hopefully see you there. Bye.